Are you guys ready? I'm not ready. I'm not even close.
We already have over a foot of snow in the mountains, so I figured it was time to get ready for winter, and I figured I would share my winter checklist with you guys this year as I go through it. Try to keep this fast and informative. We're gonna keep this pretty high level, but there's a couple really critical things for winter maintenance that I think are a really big deal. First of all, it's your battery. If your battery's been barely limping along during the summer, it's not gonna make it in the winter. So it could just be, maybe you have a weak battery, but it also could just be that you have a ton of corrosion and stuff that's built up and gunk that built up over the summer. Also, when things start to freeze, obviously your windshield wiper fluid comes in huge. So make sure that you're full there and make sure that you have an extra bottle of it in your vehicle. When you're off-roading on really muddy, icy trails and throwing snow on your windshield constantly, the worst thing ever is to have to be that guy that's like got the water bottle out the window, you know, trying to survive and be able to see while off-roading and going through all the slush. I hate it when I go into my first big winter trip and I forgot to check my windshield wipers and I find out that all they do is smear. So check your windshield wipers. Finally, I think the other big thing is your tires. Tires get a lot of neglect during the summer because you can get pretty bald and pretty bad, and you can still get by. That's not usually the case in winter, so it might be time, even if I sometimes will have a set of tires that get so low, they're still gonna be good for another summer, but they're definitely not adequate for winter. So I usually will take them off the set of rims, store them somewhere indoors, like in the shop, and then I'll put them back on in the summer and finish off the life on them. You should check your spare. By the time they need their spare, they go out to use their spare and they find out that A, it's flat, or it's 10 years old and cracking and you couldn't trust it, it's probably gonna explode. So check those out. A little bit of maintenance can go a long ways, a little bit of preparation. What do they say? Ounce of prevention. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. I don't think the best outdoor wear company out there is an outdoor wear company. There's a lot of brands out there. Like this is a brand, for example, I'm not even gonna say their name. These pants abysmally failed me. If you look at it really quick, I only wore these pants once and I hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back. So sure, it was a long once, but they're already like balling up and falling apart all along the seams and everything, which is really funny because it's happening on this patch that's like actually supposed to be the super durable extra patch that they add. These pants were over $100. They're already falling apart after one hike. So these guys don't actually make clothes targeting outdoors. They don't even advertise to outdoors people. They advertise to blue collar people. So they advertise to like framing crews and electricians and plumbers and mechanics. They have clothing and they have it rated for how warm to cold it is. So you'll have like the same pair of work pants. So you could fall in love with their work pants during the summer and you could get it in this super thin fabric that is moisture wicking and is really great to wear when it's super hot. But then in the fall, when it starts to get cold, they'll have a T, this is a work pant, that's their T1 pant, is the summer version. Then they'll have a T2, which is kind of like the next level of cold weather. And then they'll have a T3, which is like the one I'm wearing right now, that's actually like fleece lined and super thick and warm. And they do the same thing with upperwear. Like this is one of their shirts. This is a base layer. It's like Carhartt kind of. They always marketed to blue collar people, but this is actually, it like actually bends. So when you're a mechanic and you're always getting on the ground and trying to work on cars, you want stuff that will actually stretch and move around with you, but you want it to be tough. I love it because a lot of their pants, not all their pants, but a lot of their pants, you have the option of having these little Velcro pockets down here where you can put in a knee pad, a cool little flexible knee pad that they give you. They make a lot of their pants in the bibs where it's like the actual overalls or just a normal pant like this. If you guys have watched any of my videos over the last 6 months, I've been basically wearing their stuff nonstop. If you go back and watch any of them, you're gonna notice like this is all I wear anymore. It's because it works and it's super comfortable. They're about 40% cheaper than those really fancy name brands. The stuff seems more durable to me. And just because they make it for blue collar people doesn't mean it doesn't work great for camping. It doesn't mean it doesn't work great for hiking and working on your truck in a ditch in the side of the road in the mud. So I would check them out. They make everything from the upper shells to super warm parkas that you could wear in Antarctica. Okay, let's move on from clothes because I'm not a great fashion consultant. I wasn't telling you to get that stuff because it's gonna make you look amazing. I'm telling you to get the stuff because it works amazing. One thing that I always do in the winter is take a pair of muck boots with you. In my case, these are like irrigation boots. I live on a farm, so you can use the same thing. They aren't the warmest boots, so I always have a super warm pair of wool socks inside of them. And I keep these inside of my car where I can get to them without having to get out of my vehicles. And then this one is 100% just for fun, except for maybe one worst safe scenario where it could save your life. If you're gonna be someplace where it's gonna be deep snow and having fun snow wheeling, a lot of people don't snowshoe, and it's because it looks like you're walking with duck feet and you're probably gonna trip and fall down. It looks awkward, but what I've learned is they've gotten so good at these things nowadays with the way they have the hinges on them. It makes it to where you can more naturally walk with these. They're not hard to learn how to use at all anymore. Throw these on and can go hike up a mountain, go explore, do whatever you want. So they're a lot of fun. I think they're worth getting. If you've never tried them out, just know they're a lot easier to use than they look.
Okay, so cam chains, also known as speed chains, come into play in this first scenario quite a bit. See, humans are pretty inherently lazy, and a lot of times we will talk ourselves out of using safety equipment just strictly because of how long it takes to actually set up and actually use it correctly. I see people do this all the time with traditional road chains. I don't want to pull over and put them on, it's too big of a pain in the butt, right? We've all done this before in our head, I'm pretty sure. The thing that's so nice about cam chains or speed chains is they go on so fast that you don't really have that little voice in your head trying to talk you out of it. So they're super easy to use. So if you've just got a little icy patch on a trail that you're on and you just want to get around it and make sure that you're safe and you're going to have traction, it's pretty easy to talk yourself into actually using them. That guy really did almost get run over by his own car. Crazy. I have not found myself in that situation before. Okay, another reason that speed chains are great is they can be universal. I'll show you how to size it to your individual tire and wheel, but in a pinch, you can use it on just about any size tire and wheel. You can use it to get your car out, you can use it to get your buddy's car out. Speed chains can also be used in sub-ideal situations. What I mean by that is like when you're already stuck and it's incredibly hard to get normal chains on your vehicle. This comes in handy in mud, sand, and clay, especially when you just need that tiny bit of extra traction to get back on the road or get momentum moving forward again. Speed chains are also useful for many other things at camp, so they're a multi-purpose tool. You could use them for a tourniquet on your leg, you could use them as tie downs, you can use them to hold up a hammock, you can use them to hold up your pants. I've used them for that on the river before. They're just really handy pieces of equipment to have around. Okay, so really quick, let's run through how you set these things up and you use them on your truck. Okay, so first you start off with a cam strap. I like the NRS 4-footer. It works great with my 37-inch tires. Next, you grab some heavy-duty chain. Now you size your piece of chain against your tire. Make it short enough that it won't rub against your rim. There's no need to scratch all the paint off. Cut your chain to size. Loop your cam strap through one end of the chain and secure it to your tire. I like to mark the ideal position for the cam strap with a permanent marker to speed up the install. This helps me go fast without having to reposition the cam strap to make sure that it's rubbing against the tire and not the rim. Install one or even a couple on each tire to help you get out of a jam or through a particularly hairy part of the trail. Then go to camp and use your cam straps to hang your hammock. One thing to remember is this is only going to help you with traction if you keep your tires spinning. If you stop and are on your brakes, it's just going to go to the flat part of your tire and you're going to slide just like you would without the cam straps.
Okay, so before we talk heaters really quick, I noticed while I was editing that I forgot to wear my hat on the earlier parts of this, which is going to be really interesting. So please leave a comment below. Half of you, when I forget to wear my hat, scream at me in the comments section and tell me my hair is ugly. Please put my hat back on. The other half of you yell at me and tell me I should not wear my hat over my ear, but my ears are very high in my head, so it's kind of the only way that I can wear a hat. So what's more offensive to you, when I wear my hat over my ears or when I wear no hat at all? I'm very curious. So there's a lot of heaters out there that you can get for winter camping, especially snow camping. And the cool thing is, because of competition, prices are coming down. There's like a $150 diesel heater out there right now that's made by Vivor. I'll leave a link down below. I've tested it out. It's a great heater. I don't really have a lot of complaints. It's a diesel heater, which means you have to carry diesel. I find that really annoying because I already carry spare gas, regular gas, for my truck. Then I carry propane for my stove, and now I gotta carry diesel as well. But when you go and you price out the propane heaters, I mean, I've done a video on this one, and I'm gonna do an install video on it very soon because I actually took everything apart and I'm redoing the truck. So I'll show you the install and how to set this up. I love this one because it actually gives you a fireplace inside your truck because you can actually see the flames right here and everything. So it's a super cool fireplace and everything, but these things cost like $800. So as the diesel heaters are getting a little better and a little more reliable, I would tell you there's pros and cons of both. The diesel heaters obviously are generally a little bit louder, but for some people that equals white noise and it actually helps you sleep. And then for some people, they just go, nope, absolutely cannot sleep with this thing on. So it comes down to personal preference a lot of times. So if you're gonna go the diesel route, you need a really good way to secure it. You need a good way to carry possibly a third form of fuel. And you need to understand how to service it on the fly when you're out in the field because they still do gum up sometimes and clog up. So you gotta know how to work on them. Propane route, much easier, pretty much never clog up, pretty much just always work, but they cost 4 times, 5 times, even 6 times as much money. So think about it. If you're thinking about getting a heater, do your research. Definitely you can check out that Viver heater on the diesel side. This one is great if you want a fireplace, but like I said, it's like $800, if not more, depending on where it's in stock. But then you also have like the Webasto ones where you can't actually see it. It can be installed underneath your vehicle. Some people love the propane and are willing to pay for it. They say buy it once, cry once, never buy again. Some people go the diesel route and sometimes they can last you a long time and sometimes they break a lot. And you have to service them or buy another one. But nowadays, at 150 bucks a pop, they're getting pretty compelling. Okay, let's talk tools. Not these type of tools, not automotive tools. I've already done a whole entire video on that. You can click the link and check that out if you need to know what I have in my tool bag to be able to work on my truck on the side of the road. I'm talking about tools specifically related to winter driving conditions. When you're driving in winter, you definitely want to have a chainsaw. That could be a gas-powered one, an electric one, a battery-powered one, whatever you want. You need to have a chainsaw because that snow and that weather can bring down trees and it can block your way, obviously. If you don't want to take a whole entire chainsaw of some kind, they have these cool foldable saws that fold out that are pretty big enough to saw through like an actual decent-sized tree. You might want to check one of those out. I'll leave a link below for those as well. So you want to be able to get something to be able to saw through a tree to get down a road, just in case you get blocked in. The other thing that I would say is a critical winter tool is of course a shovel. And you know those little dinky ones that you fold out, you're like, hi, I got my shovel, I'm ready to go. That is not going to get you unstuck when you're completely high centered on ice. So you want to get a real shovel for winter, something that folds out, something that is at least, you know, a good 4 feet long, something that's got a good head on it to hack at ice and chip away at stuff when you get high centered on big old boulders of ice and chunky snow. That's the biggest thing I really find myself having to dig out of, where it gets really annoying and you got to be almost laying under your car half the time. So the longer the handle, even if it's a foldable one of some kind, the better. So that's the main thing. Lots of other tools we can talk about. I have other videos on those, but for the winter, you need a good shovel and you need something to cut through some wood. Okay, let's take a quick second to talk comms. And I want to be serious for a second because this is kind of a big deal. This one hits a little close to home here. In Idaho, we actually had, this is a couple years ago, but we actually had some people that went out on a trip in the winter to go explore Silver City, which is a really popular ghost town that everybody goes to. And they actually broke down and got stuck. And they tried to hike out, and well, at least the dad tried to hike out, and he actually passed away. Now, this could all be prevented a few different ways. One is knowing your vehicle and knowing how to air down your tires and get traction and things like that. Taking a proper vehicle, taking the proper survival gear, so you should be able to survive anywhere if you get lost for at least 72 hours. We'll talk about that in the next segment. But the biggest thing here is communications. If you're going to travel anywhere, especially solo, where there is no cell service, you need to have a safety plan. And your plan starts with two things. One is being able to communicate with other people. I use an inReach. If anybody doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't want to get into all these complicated devices, get an inReach, because an inReach, you can set it up to where you can send text messages to your friends through satellite. But even if you forget to learn how to do that, as long as you have it with you, there is a button you can engage on it, and it will go and notify the local search and rescue centers. We actually have a cabin way up in the mountains in a very remote area, and our friends actually manage the search and rescue up there. They get a call probably every month, if not multiple calls every month, where they have to go out and find people and rescue them. And a lot of those calls are coming from inReaches. So get an inReach. Now, the other thing that people forget about communications is it's all about the communication you had with somebody before you left. You should have somebody that knows where you're going, when you left, and when you're planning on getting back. Most states have local search and rescue or off-road recovery groups. I know Idaho does, Boise does. We have one here. It's organized on Facebook, so if somebody gets stuck out in the mountains, they're able to communicate to home, whether through an inReach or some other device. If you don't want the whole entire ambulance and helicopters coming out, you can get in touch with your local search and rescue off-road group, and they will put together a team to come out and get you, and it actually is pretty effective. So if you're gonna go off-roading in a particular area, look into the groups that do these types of recoveries, know how to get a hold of them, get yourself an inReach for if everything goes wrong, and make sure that somebody else knows where you're going and knows where to look for you. Okay, let's talk about the worst case scenario. In a worst case scenario, let's say you get stuck, and even if you have good communication device, people maybe can't get to you because of a storm or too many trees are down or something like that. Everybody should have enough stuff with them to be able to survive on their own for 72 hours. The reason that number is so critical is that mathematically, statistically, in these type of situations, 95% of these situations are resolved within 72 hours. You need to be able to survive in all kinds of different weather. It could be snowing, it could be raining, it could be below freezing, all kinds of terrible things, right? So you want to be able to have a decently advanced survival kit, but you don't want it to take up like the whole entire back of your truck. So there's experts that have been building these for years. I could give you the list of what's in mine, but in all reality, when I look through mine, I actually go and double check it against these lists from people that create these things. So if you're starting from scratch, there's a company called Uncharted. They sell 72-hour survival kits. They fit in a backpack for one person. They have a one-person and a two-person version. I know their one-person one is actually on sale, like I think it's almost $100 off right now or something, because I was just looking at it to look through the list of everything. So I'll show that on the screen because that does give you your comprehensive list. If you don't want to buy a kit that somebody else makes for you and you want to make your own, totally makes sense. I actually am kind of in that boat where I actually own probably 2/3 of the things already that would be on that list, and I only needed to go pick up another third, and I could source those myself a lot cheaper and just by buying them, right? So I am not telling you guys go buy this kit, but definitely at least go look at the kit. Look at the list of everything that's in it. Build out your own kit or go buy a kit. If you're starting from scratch and you don't have anything, it is actually probably cheaper to buy their kit. If you're going to go really far out in very remote places where there isn't cell coverage, and especially if you're gonna travel solo, this is like a must, like an absolute must-have.